Morning after my grandmother's funeral, I opened my banking app out of habit, the same way I checked the weather before getting out of bed. The number I saw made me sit up so fast I knocked my coffee off the nightstand. $41,000. Gone. Not a fraud alert, not a pending transaction, just gone like it had never existed. My emergency fund, my down payment savings, 3 years of double shifts at Vancouver General, every dollar I had scraped together since my divorce, erased overnight. And the last person who had been on my phone helping me set up online access from the road, because my signal was bad at the funeral home, was my brother. I need to back up. My grandmother, Nana Bet, passed away on a Tuesday in late October. She was 83, sharp until the very end, and she left behind a 2-story house in Abbotsford, a jar of buttons on her kitchen windowsill that I still can't think about without crying, and 4 adult grandchildren who loved her, or so I believed. She was the only person in my family who ever made me feel like my choices mattered. When I left my marriage at 28 with nothing but a suitcase and a nursing license, she was the one who called me every Sunday for 6 months straight. Not to ask what happened, just to talk. The funeral arrangements fell to my aunt, who lives 10 minutes from the house and has handled every family crisis since I can remember. Quietly, efficiently, without complaint. I drove down from Vancouver the night before the service. My brother flew in from Toronto. My cousin and her husband came up from Seattle. My uncle, my grandmother's only surviving son, arrived last, with his wife, who smiled too wide at the wake and kept asking whether Nana had updated her will recently. I noticed that. I filed it away. The service was hard in the way that honest funerals are hard. There were no eulogies that stretched the truth. People cried because they meant it. Afterward, we all went back to the house, ate sandwiches, and did the quiet, painful work of being family without the person who had held us together. That evening, my brother, I'll call him by what he's always been to me, which is the person I trusted most in the world, came and sat beside me on Nana's back porch. The November air was cold and damp the way it gets in the Fraser Valley, that particular gray that settles into your bones. We talked for a while. About Nana. About our childhoods. About how strange it felt to be in her house without her in it. At some point, I mentioned that I'd been trying to link my savings account to a new budgeting app and it kept timing out. My signal at the house was terrible. He offered to help. He said he knew a workaround. Something about resetting the app permissions through the browser. I handed him my phone without a second thought. He was my brother. He knew more about technology than I did. He handed it back 10 minutes later and said he'd sorted it. I didn't check. I trusted him. The next morning, driving back up the sea to sky toward Vancouver, I pulled into a Tim Hortons in hope and opened the app while my coffee brewed. That's when I saw it, the balance, the timestamp. A transfer to an account I didn't recognize. Processed at 11,047 the previous night while I was asleep in Nana's guest room. My hands went cold. I sat in that parking lot for probably 15 minutes, just staring at the screen. My brain kept trying to reframe it. A mistake. A glitch. Something the bank would fix with one phone call. But I knew what a transfer confirmation looked like. I knew my own account number, and I knew that the only person who had touched my phone the night before, the only person who had been inside my banking app, was sitting in a rental car somewhere behind me, probably already headed to the airport. I didn't call him. Not yet. I drove the rest of the way home in a kind of controlled silence that I now understand was shock. I've seen it in patience, that eerie calm that descends when something is too large to process in real time. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop, and I looked at every transaction in my account going back 6 months. The transfer was clean. One movement. $41,260. His fingerprints, or close enough to them, were all over it. I called my bank first. Fraud department. I explained what had happened without using the word brother, because I needed to hear myself say it out loud first, to a stranger, before I said it to someone who knew me. The woman on the phone was patient and precise. She told me that because the transfer had been initiated from my own device using my own credentials, it would be classified as authorized. That the path to recovery would likely require a police report. That I should document everything. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat with it for another hour. Just sat with it. I want to be honest about what that hour felt like, because I think people who haven't experienced betrayal from someone they love often imagine it as pure rage. It wasn't. It was grief layered on top of grief. This sudden doubling of loss, my grandmother, and now the version of my brother I had carried in my head my whole life. The boy who used to save me the last of the cereal. The teenager who drove 4 hours to pick me up when my ex-husband's temper first scared me badly enough to leave. The man I had flown to Toronto for twice in 3 years when his life fell apart. I had never once counted what I'd given him. It hadn't occurred to me to count. He called me that afternoon, from the airport, tearful, normal, asking if I had gotten home okay, saying the funeral had been hard but good, saying we should visit more. I listened to his voice and I thought, he's going to let me find it on my own. He's not going to say a word. I said I was tired and I'd call him later. Then I called my aunt. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, like she's been waiting for whatever comes next. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a silence, and then she said, quietly and very clearly, "This isn't the first time." That sentence rearranged something in my chest. She told me that 3 years ago, when my grandmother had broken her hip and briefly needed in-home care, my brother had offered to manage the insurance reimbursements. She'd found out afterward, from a slip of paper Nana had tucked into a kitchen drawer, that several checks had been deposited and never forwarded. Nana had never said anything. My aunt had never said anything, because Nana had asked her not to, because she was his grandmother, and she loved him, and she believed he would pay it back. He never did. I asked my aunt how much. She said she wasn't sure. Somewhere around 12,000? I thanked her, and I let her go. Then I opened my laptop again, and this time I wasn't looking at my own accounts. I was thinking. Not emotionally. I mean, I was actively trying to turn my thinking clinical, the way you do in triage when you can't afford to feel everything at once. I needed a sequence. I needed evidence. I needed to not do anything irreversible out of anger that would make the legal path harder. I am a nurse, not a lawyer. But I know how to document. I know how to build a timeline. I know how to keep records that hold up when you need them to. I spent the next week building a file, screenshots of the transfer, the timestamp, the app access log that my bank's fraud department had sent me by email, the text from the night of the funeral where he'd offered to help with my phone. Friendly, casual, nothing that would read as sinister to someone who didn't know. The voicemail he'd left the next day, that cheerful airport call, which I had saved. I printed my aunt's account of the missing insurance money and had her sign it. I called a lawyer, a woman whose name I got from a colleague at the hospital, someone who specialized in civil litigation and fraud recovery. I paid the consultation fee with my credit card and I did not apologize for needing help. My lawyer told me that the strongest move was to file a police report immediately, before I contacted my brother, before he had any reason to move money or prepare a story. She told me what to bring. She told me what to say and what not to say. She told me to stop texting him anything that could be used against me. I filed the report on a Thursday morning at the RCMP detachment near my apartment. The officer who took my statement was matter-of-fact, professional. He asked his questions in the flat, careful way that means he's heard this before. When I mentioned that this wasn't the first incident, that my grandmother had also been a victim, his pen didn't stop moving. My brother called me twice that week. I texted back that I was overwhelmed with work and would call when I had a moment. He sent a voice message saying he understood that funerals are hard, that he was thinking of me. I listened to it once and then I saved it to the file. The one thing I had not yet done was talk to my uncle, my grandmother's son, the man who had driven up from Seattle with his wife, who asked too many questions about the will. I'd been circling around that conversation for days, not sure what I was afraid to find. I called him on a Sunday afternoon, kept it gentle, asked how he was processing everything, and then, carefully, I asked whether anyone in the family had approached him about Nana's estate. He paused for a moment that lasted too long. He said that my brother had called him 2 days after the funeral, that he'd explained there were some outstanding debts that had come up against the estate and that handling them quickly before probate would save everyone time and taxes. He'd asked my uncle to transfer $15,000 to an account he described as Nana's legal trust. My uncle had not transferred anything because he'd wanted to ask a lawyer first. But he hadn't told anyone because he thought maybe he was misunderstanding something. He was 71 years old and he trusted his nephew. I told him he hadn't misunderstood anything. We stayed on the phone for almost 2 hours. By the end of it, I had his written account of the conversation as well, sent by email to me and copied to my lawyer. My brother had no idea that any of this was happening. As far as he knew, I was grieving, overwhelmed, trusting. As far as he knew, I was the same person I had always been in our family dynamic, the one who absorbed things quietly, who smoothed things over, who gave until she had nothing left and then gave anyway because that's what you do for the people you love. He was wrong. My lawyer filed the civil claim in early December. The police investigation was already open. On the morning we filed, she sent a registered letter to his Toronto address. I know the exact day it arrived because he called me 40 minutes later and his voice was different. That easy warmth was gone. What replaced it was something harder and defensive and underneath everything, frightened. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said he'd been planning to put the money back. He said he was going through something, that he'd made a bad decision in a bad moment, that family doesn't do this to family. He said the word family 4 times in the first 2 minutes, which told me everything I needed to know about the argument he thought would still work on me. I let him finish. Then I said very calmly, "You took my emergency fund the night we buried our grandmother. That's what happened. I have the transfer record, I have the access log, I have your voicemail from the airport the next day. I have Nana's insurance money documented. I have your call to Uncle where you tried to get 15,000 more." I paused. "My lawyer will be in touch." He started to speak. I said, "I hope you get help," and I ended the call. I won't pretend that didn't break something in me. It did. I sat on my bathroom floor afterward and cried for probably an hour, and it wasn't about the money. It was about the 29 years I had invested in the idea of him. Every Sunday I'd called from the hospital parking lot because I knew he was struggling. Every time I'd looked the other way because I told myself it was complicated, because I told myself he was trying. Grief has a particular texture when the person you're mourning is still alive. It's heavier somehow, unresolved. But here is what I also know. I did not fall apart. I felt everything and I kept moving. The civil proceedings took 7 months. The criminal investigation took longer. My lawyer was precise and relentless in the way that I admire in people. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She just laid out what had happened and let it speak. The transfer records were unambiguous. The access log placed his activity on my device at the exact timestamp. The voicemail he left me the next morning, cheerful and ordinary, became one of the most damning pieces of evidence. Proof of consciousness, my lawyer said. Proof that he knew exactly what he had done and had calculated that I wouldn't find it in time to matter. My uncle testified. My aunt provided her written account. 2 former colleagues of my brother's from Toronto, people I had never met, came forward during the investigation with their own accounts of money that had gone missing in circumstances he had managed. The civil judgment came in June. Full restitution of the 41,000, plus legal costs, plus a separate finding related to my grandmother's estate that my aunt had helped establish. The criminal charges, fraud over $5,000 under the criminal code, resulted in a conviction. He was sentenced to 18 months, of which he would serve a portion in the community. He was required to complete a financial management program. A lot of people, when I've told this story, say the sentence wasn't enough. Maybe they're right. I don't have strong feelings about that part anymore. What I know is that I got my money back. I got the truth on record. I got the version of events that existed in my bones, finally confirmed in writing, in a courthouse, by someone with the authority to name it for what it was. My aunt and I are closer now than we have ever been. She came to Vancouver in August, and we walked the seawall and ate sushi and talked for 4 hours about Nana and about all the things we both spent years not saying. She told me she'd spent decades managing my brother's messes quietly because she thought it was what Nana needed from her. She said she was sorry she hadn't warned me sooner. I told her there was nothing to be sorry for. Some things you can only understand after they've already cost you something. I went back to Abbotsford in September to Nana's house, which was in the process of being sold as part of the estate settlement. I walked through the rooms one more time alone. I stood in the kitchen, and I looked at the jar of buttons on the windowsill. It was still there. No one had moved it. And I thought about the last real conversation I'd had with her, 3 weeks before she died, when she told me she was proud of how I'd rebuilt my life. She had this way of saying things plainly without decoration that made them feel permanent. I took the jar of buttons home with me. It sits on my windowsill now, here in Vancouver, where I can see it from my kitchen table when I have my coffee in the morning. I still work at the hospital. I'm back to saving. I bought a solo membership to a hiking club on the North Shore, and I'd made 2 friends there who feel like the kind that last. I changed all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on everything, and reviewed every account I own with a fine-toothed comb, which I should have done years ago, and which I would not have done if none of this had happened. People ask me if I've forgiven him. Honestly, that question has started to feel like the wrong one. Forgiveness used to feel like something I owed other people, a way of proving I was generous, that I wasn't bitter, that I was the bigger person. I don't think that anymore. I think what I owe myself is clarity. I know what he is now. I know what it cost me to find out. I know that I am allowed to hold that knowledge, use it to protect myself, and build a life that doesn't require me to keep paying for other people's choices. Nana used to say that you can love someone and still put down what they're making you carry. I'm working on that every day. There's a jar of buttons sitting on my windowsill right now, and some mornings I look at it before I've even had my first sip of coffee. It doesn't make me sad the way I thought it would. It makes me feel something quieter than that, like a reminder of what's real and what I was willing to protect. I've thought a lot about why things unfolded the way they did. Not in a fatalistic way, not in the sense that the universe was watching and keeping score, more in the sense that actions have weight and eventually that weight lands somewhere. My brother made choices. Not once, not impulsively, but repeatedly, over years, across multiple people he was supposed to love. He took from Nana when she was recovering from a broken hip. He tried to take from our uncle while we were still raw from her funeral. He took from me the night we buried her. That pattern didn't appear out of nowhere, and it didn't disappear on its own. It accumulated until it became undeniable, and then it became a court record. What I keep coming back to is the question of character, not as some abstract concept, but as something practical. The way you behave when you think no one is watching, when you believe the other person trusts you too much to check, when the opportunity is right there and the risk feels low. My brother believed I was the same person I'd always been in our family, someone who would absorb the loss, smooth it over, protect him from the consequences out of love. He wasn't wrong about my history. He was wrong about who I'd become. I didn't fight back with anger. I want to be clear about that. What I used was clarity. I documented everything. I called my lawyer before I called him. I listened to my aunt without dismissing what she told me because it was uncomfortable. That kind of clear-headed response, staying precise when everything in you wants to collapse, is something I had to actively choose. It didn't come naturally in that Tim Hortons parking lot in hope, staring at a balance that had been gutted overnight. It came from deciding, somewhere in that long quiet drive home, that I was not going to let grief make me passive. And I think about my aunt too. She carried that secret about Nana's insurance money for years because she thought protecting the peace was the same as doing right. I understand that impulse completely. But silence when it shields someone who keeps causing harm isn't kindness. It's the thing that makes the next harm possible. The most decent thing she ever did for this family was tell me the truth when I called her for my kitchen table. That one honest conversation changed the entire shape of what came after. There's something my grandmother understood that I'm still learning. Real strength isn't about how much you can endure without breaking. It's about knowing when to stop absorbing and start acting. She endured more than she should have, quietly, out of love for someone who kept taking advantage of that love. I don't judge her for it. But I made a different choice, and I think she would have understood why. I still work the same shifts. I still make the same drive over the bridge in the dark before a 6 a.m. start. But I know now, in a way I didn't before, what I'm capable of when something matters enough. That knowledge belongs to me. No one can transfer it out of my account.